Greetings, dear viewers. This is George from Ireland, and I'm continuing my series about the Ulster Troubles. So pick up where I left off in 1997. I should have pointed out that when Tony Blair became Prime Minister, he appointed a new Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. It was Mo Mowlam. The contrast between her and her predecessor, Sir Patrick Mayhew, could hardly be greater. He with his patrician manners and restraint and old world style. So Mo Mowlam, she came from a lower middle class family, somewhere in the English Midlands. She'd been a left-wing academic. What else can I say? Very down to earth. The people's Mo, as they called her, saying she was so touch and feely. She was also suffering from cancer at the time and wore a wig, would sometimes take it off in exasperation during meetings, had been likened to an only slightly effeminate Geordie trucker. So she was prone to answering the phone whilst she was seated upon the throne. Anyway, Ulster Unionist MPs did not find her to her taste because they were often quite Victorian. So she stood on the phone to Martin McGuinness a lot and calling him babe, which of course really got the backs up of the Unionists. So she'd been to see the Garvaghey Road Residents Association soon after her appointment, and they were asking, what's going to happen? Are you going to have the Orangemen coming down here or not? She said, I don't know. That's up to the Parades Commission. And they said, so whatever the decision, will you come and tell us in person? And Mowlam foolishly said yes. Anyway, the parade was to go through in the end, and Dr. Mowlam was told by the RUC, it's not safe for you to go back because people will be so irate. So she broke that pledge, which she had foolishly given without consulting with her security advisors. So I point out that the Rainbow Coalition in the Republic of Ireland was out, Fianna Fáil, PDs and a few others, and Fine Gael was out. Fianna Fáil was back in under Bertie Ahern. Ahern had burnished his nationalist, even Republican credentials. His party's subtitle was the Republican Party. His father had been in the IRA in Cork in the 1920s. Now that's mainstream in the south of Ireland to look back to the IRA of that era, 1916 up to 21, even to 23, is acceptable, and many Southern Irish politicians in the mid-20th century wanted to say that they had been involved in that in the 20s and sometimes rather exaggerate their role in militancy. But Ahern was a stern foe of the IRA in the 90s. British Army helicopters landed in the Republic of Ireland with his permission as part of their anti-IRA operations, though they didn't actually attack the IRA in the south. Remember some army officers in the 70s that had been agitating for the right of hot pursuit because they're saying, we know from undercover surveillance where the IRA's bases and training camps are in the south. Why don't we just go there and kill them? It's a conflict. Having brought troops onto the streets, you must accept it's a military situation and not treat it as a policing one. But anyway, the UK government had never authorised that. So the new governments in Dublin and London were more willing to speak to Sinn Féin than their predecessors had been. Of course, they were having these behind closed doors contacts with the IRA, I think by intermediaries. So I spoke to Sir Patrick Mayhew shortly after he left office, and he agreed that they'd only parleyed with the IRA because the IRA were in a reasonably strong position, could cause quite a lot of damage. But the security forces had the upper hand, which is why the Provisional IRA was willing to settle for something quite trifling, the sort of thing that they would never have contemplated agreeing to before. They were not going to have some sort of Saigon-style victory. They were not going to be storming into Belfast City Hall. That was for the birds. The idea of soldiers scrambling for their helicopters to be evacuated was their fantasy. So the Drumcree dispute came up again. Garvaghey Road is the leg back from that church at Drumcree, and the Orangemen were allowed down in 97, and there was the customary rioting. I think a lot of this fury was rather contrived. You see these youths, whether Republican or Loyalist, rioting over these things, and they're having a ball. For them, it's a carnival atmosphere. They're being macho. They can show off to their mates. They're laughing. They're rather enjoying it. So I don't think they actually are furious. They're just looking for an excuse to burn buses and do whatever else. And the RUC had borrowed water cannon from the Belgian police. Why on earth did they not have several water cannon already? Had become adept at keeping the situation under control, building big barriers, that the army was there in support. General Sir Mike Jackson was there, and he made some offhand comment about how much he disrespected Orangemen and thought they were complete ninnies for causing this all the time and really damaging their own image. Let me see, what was the next thing? The IRA ceasefire had come in. The Blair government did not demand disarmament as a precondition from talks, as Major's had, because Major wanted to know there was a permanent cessation of violence. It couldn't just be tactical and temporary. But that December in 1997, Sinn Féin delegation led by Adams was allowed into Downing Street for the first time since 1921. Of course, some of those people who'd been in 1921, like Michael Collins, had turned into the government of Southern Ireland, subsequently to be the Republic of Ireland. I know that Collins did not long survive his visit to Downing Street. And anyway, a crowd of Unionists and ex-soldiers was there to express their detestation of Adams and all his works. Billy Wright, who was the supreme of the LVF, was in the Maze prison for issuing death threats. And the INLA was also in there. The INLA was not on ceasefire. And one of them had a gun smuggled into him, shows rather lax security, and he managed to shoot Wright dead on the 27th of December that year. So Wright had authorised the murder of up to 20 people, none of whom was in the IRA or INLA. Many people were jubilant about that, but the LVF started to hit back, not at the INLA, just at any Catholic they could get. So the INLA killed 2 more loyalist terrorists in the coming weeks. There was the Points Pass attack in March 1998. There was this pub. The LVF burst in and opened fire there. They killed 2 men, one of either major denomination. Trimble said, "I'm ashamed that the perpetrators of this act were Protestants." Another point is Paisley was also condemning the LVF's crimes. He's saying, so-and-so broke the head of a Roman Catholic with a brick. Is that the action of a Protestant? So Paisley did speak out against loyalist terrorism, despite people often besmirching his reputation, saying he was behind it. I know he'd use inflammatory rhetoric, but he did not incite people to commit crimes against the Catholic minority. And then the LVF reached a new low of savagery when they had a row with one of their members. They beat him to death in the Maze, and they couldn't tell who it was. So the UDA were in risk of coming off their ceasefire. So Mo Molan went into the Maze prison and spoke to them, persuaded them not to do so. Was this the right thing to do? Some people lauded her moral courage. Others say it was bowing to terrorism yet again. Anyway, the UDA ceasefire held. Their political party was the Ulster Democratic Party. And the LVF had said they'd taken a measured response to the slaying of their founder, Billy Wright. So April 1998, negotiations were going on in Belfast, been going on for some weeks beforehand. Adams made an outburst a few weeks prior to that saying, "I'm pissed off with trying to make this thing work here," and blah, blah, blah. So his own side wanted considerable concessions, and there were some people in Sinn Féin and the IRA who would not settle for anything unless it was very extensive, but that wasn't on the cards. The DUP was dead against having these discussions anyway. The Alliance and the SDLP were fully on board. The Ulster Unionist Party was jittery. Some of them were deeply uncomfortable about the whole idea in the first place. And so Trimble was under considerable pressure from within his own ranks not to agree to too much. Senator George Mitchell from the United States came over to chair the talks. The thing is, the United States could hardly be an honest broker. Everybody knows that US policy was entirely for the nationalist side, not for the unionist side. Reagan, he had pressurized his friend, Mrs. Thatcher, to make the Anglo-Irish Agreement. Democrats in Congress, who were outspoken advocates of the nationalist cause, had urged him to do so. But finally, on Good Friday 1998, the agreement was signed. Properly, it's the Belfast Agreement, but it's going to be known as the Good Friday Agreement. So there were 3 strands to it: relationships within Northern Ireland, relationships between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, and relationships between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And nothing was to be agreed till everything was to be agreed. So it reaffirmed the principle of the Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1985 that Northern Ireland would only join the Republic of Ireland if the majority of people there wished. So that was really the core principle of unionism with which Sinn Féin had to accept. A Council of Ireland was to be established. These cross-border bodies, the things that were supposed to be going in 1921, had indeed been going under Sunningdale in 1974. And indeed, even prior to Sunningdale, both parts of Ireland had cooperated on lighthouses, on trains, on buses, I can't think what else, on electricity, so it wasn't entirely new. A new Northern Ireland Assembly of 108 members was to be elected. Each Westminster constituency was to get 6 people to be elected on a proportional basis. And then a next executive was to be formed on the D'Hondt formula, which required a proportional representation from both communities. As in, if the Nationalists had 45% of the vote, they would have 45% of the representation, whatever it was to be. First Minister to come from the larger community, and the Deputy First Minister to come from the smaller one. So the Republic of Ireland was to reformulate its constitution, and it was to reword Articles 2 and 3 to recognise that it had no right over Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland would only join the Irish Republic if the majority of people there voted to do so. A commission was to be impanelled to examine reform of the RUC, and there would be a new inquiry regarding the events of the 30th of January 1972, what occurred in Derry that day.